The blaring blast of a brass band outside my window jolted me awake at 6 in the morning. Definitely not how I planned to start a peaceful Saturday. At first, I figured it had to be a dream, maybe a leftover noise from the movie I'd watched the night before, but then came the unmistakable screech of microphone feedback, quickly followed by a woman yelling something about buys and linen placements. I groaned and rolled over, squinting at the sunlight seeping through the blinds. The noise wasn't fading, it was intensifying. That's when I finally dragged myself out of bed, shuffled over to the window, and pulled back the curtain. What I saw nearly made me choke on my own spit. A full wedding setup had materialized right on my front lawn. Neatly aligned white chairs, a floral arch planted next to my pond, massive catering tents standing like they were part of some regimented drill. Strangers, dozens of them, were bustling around, laughing, shouting, adjusting things as if they owned the place. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. Still there. I live on a secluded property, surrounded by forest and open fields. My nearest neighbor is half a mile down the road. The only people allowed on my land are the helicopter pilots who lease it for landings, and occasionally the mailman, if he's feeling adventurous. Furious, I stormed outside barefoot, dressed in plaid pajama bottoms and an ancient college sweatshirt, stomping across the dew-covered grass toward the spectacle. A woman in a silky robe turned to greet me. Her hair was styled to perfection, and her grin was the kind that could sour cream. "Oh good, you're here," she chirped, like we were lifelong pals. "Don't worry, we'll clean everything up after the ceremony." I came to a full stop. "Excuse me, who are you? And what are you doing on my property?" She blinked, puzzled by my question. "I'm Karen, I'm the bride. This is our wedding venue." I actually laughed, loudly. I glanced around, half expecting to see hidden cameras. Maybe this was some elaborate prank, a viral TikTok in the making, but no one else seemed in on the joke. Karen's smile faltered. "Our planner said this field was community land. You weren't using it, so we figured it'd be fine." As if on cue, a man passed by with a tray of shrimp cocktails. Someone was tweaking the archway. A group of groomsmen played hacky sack by my tool shed. I stood there, waiting for someone to break the illusion, to tell me I was being pranked. But Karen was already calling out new instructions to her bridesmaids. I could feel my blood pressure climbing. "You don't have permission to be here. This is private property." Her tone shifted. "Well, we're already set up, and guests are arriving. It would be such a shame to ruin my big day over a bit of grass." A bit of grass? It was 3 acres, not just any grass, but fair registered helicopter landing grounds. Before I could reply, the air filled with a low, rhythmic thumping, distant at first, then unmistakably clear. Rotor blades. "Oh number." "Oh yes." Right on cue. A Bell 407 helicopter soared into view above the tree line, flying low and quick. Guests began to look around, bewildered. Karen spun on her heels and screamed. Tent walls flapped wildly in the wind as the helicopter approached. By the time it began to descend directly over her carefully arranged dance floor, people were scattering. Tablecloths tore free, hair extensions flew, the flower arch tipped like a sinking ship. I stepped back onto my porch, folded my arms, and watched. The pilot hovered, then landed with a loud, rushing whoosh of air and dust. A bridesmaid lost her shoe and went skidding across the grass like a hockey puck. Karen clung to a table, trying to stay upright, yelling for someone to make it stop. She screamed at the cockpit to go away. But that's not how commercial leases work. I rent that land to a helicopter company that runs sightseeing tours and flight training. Saturdays are reserved for landings, every hour on the hour. This wasn't a one-off. This was just the opening act. Karen stormed back up to my porch, makeup smeared, veil tangled around her neck. "You have to stop them," she shrieked. "Tell them to go." I stared her down. "I can't. They pay to be here." "You don't." She looked at me like I just sprouted horns. "I'll call the police," she snapped. "Perfect," I said, grinning. "Let's get this settled the right way." Hands trembling, she made the call while her guests ducked behind catering trucks and tried to salvage what was left of a wedding cake that had toppled off its table. Roughly 10 minutes later, a sheriff's deputy pulled into my driveway. I handed over everything: AFA permits, lease agreements, emails with the helicopter company. Meanwhile, Karen offered nothing more than a wobbly claim that her wedding planner told her the field was available. The deputy raised an eyebrow. "You didn't get written permission?" "No, a broken bar, but I was told, ma'am." The deputy cut her off. "This is trespassing. You can't just set up a wedding on someone's private land because it looks nice." Karen began to cry, but it wasn't heartbreak, it was fury, a full-on, red-face meltdown, and honestly, it was just getting started. She insisted this was meant to be the happiest day of her life, and I was the one single-handedly destroying it. I calmly pointed to the sign nailed to my fence. "Private property and no trespassing, FA authorized airspace." She claimed she hadn't seen it. I said the floral garlands her crew wrapped around the fence must have covered it up. "So let me get this straight," I said. "You covered the warning sign. And now you're surprised by the consequences?" "You hosted a wedding on an active helicopter landing zone." Karen turned on her heel and stormed off, veil trailing behind her like a torn sail caught in the wind. The sheriff gave me a small nod, a part approval, part amusement. Then he informed Karen that she and her guests had exactly 30 minutes to clear the property or they'd start issuing citations. Her face flushed crimson as the helicopter's blades roared back to life, sending another whirlwind through the wreckage of her centerpieces. I turned to the deputy. "Sometimes justice doesn't come in a courtroom," I said. "Sometimes it flies in right on schedule." He chuckled all the way back to his patrol car. Guests slowly began to leave. Vendors grumbled as they packed up. Karen vanished behind the wheel of a BMW, rust-colored lace dragging from the open trunk. I stood exactly where her altar had once stood, gazing skyward as another chopper appeared on the horizon. They wanted a spectacle, and they got one. Wind, noise, humiliation, and the most dramatic public eviction this side of a reality show. And I hadn't even changed out of my pajamas. By the time that first helicopter lifted off, all that remained was a mess: overturned chairs, obliterated centerpieces, and a wedding cake that looked like it had been hit by a leaf blower. The few guests still there stood around in stunned silence, some shielding their eyes from the dust, others capturing the destruction on their phones. Karen had retreated somewhere, likely her car, to either scream or sob, possibly both. The groom, who had been notably silent throughout the ordeal, finally made his way toward me. He walked like a man stepping barefoot over broken glass. By now I was back on my porch, coffee in hand, far calmer than I had any right to be, but still undeniably entertained. He cleared his throat and spoke in a low, apologetic voice, barely audible over the wind. "Look, man. This is a disaster." I didn't know he didn't have permission. Karen told me it was all taken care of. I looked at him, trying to decide whether he was genuinely clueless or just trying to charm his way into extending their stay before the next aerial interruption. Didn't matter either way. I told him plainly, "This land is contracted out every Saturday from noon until sundown. There are 4 more helicopters scheduled to land today. If they were hoping for a peaceful, sunset ceremony, they'd picked the single worst venue imaginable." He gave me a slow, defeated nod and wandered back to the disoriented guests. I couldn't make out what he said to them, but what I did hear was the familiar thrum of another approaching rotor. Right on cue, guests scrambled once more. Some clutched drinks, others ducked beneath whatever poles or tables were still standing. A small child clung to a bouquet like it was a flotation device. An elderly aunt tripped over a loose mic cable and landed in a folding chair that promptly gave out beneath her. Helicopter number 2 came in low, then touched down just feet from what used to be their dance floor. The gust of heat and air that followed felt like the entire universe had activated a hairdryer set to maximum chaos. A few guests gave up completely, bolting for the parking lot, starting their cars, and disappearing like they were fleeing a cursed event. The photographer, who had previously been trying to get romantic shots near the flower arch, abandoned the effort and started filming the scene like he was capturing footage for a documentary called Disaster at Noon. Karen re-emerged minutes later, hair destroyed, lipstick smudged, veil bunched around her waist like a makeshift belt. She marched up to the edge of my porch, her eyes blazing. "You've made your point," she growled. "Can you please stop ruining my wedding?" I leaned forward, met her gaze, and said slowly, "A broken bar. The helicopters pay to land here." I said plainly, "You didn't, and you weren't invited." Her eyes burned with fury, lips parting to unleash another rant, but the groom stepped in before she could explode. "Can we work something out?" he asked, hopeful. I tilted my head. "What kind of deal are we talking about?" Karen's face lit up like she thought salvation was on the horizon. "Maybe," the groom said, "you could just delay the flights until after the ceremony, just an hour at tops. I can give you a couple $100 for the trouble." I almost laughed. I told him that even if I wanted to pause the flights, I couldn't. Clearance was set in advance. The pilots were on a tight timetable. The flights had paying customers, and canceling one would cost me more than a few bills crumpled from his wallet. Karen looked like she might implode, but instead of shouting, she whipped out her phone and started dialing. Within seconds, she was yelling at the police dispatcher, claiming rogue helicopters were terrorizing her wedding. While she shrieked into the phone, I stepped away and called the helicopter company's manager. He laughed as soon as I explained what was happening. Apparently, the pilots had already radioed in their version of events and were loving every second of it. One even gave a guest a lift just to help him escape the chaos. That gave me an idea. I asked the manager if we could offer complimentary short flights to the guests, a sort of spontaneous airlift out of wedding mayhem. He was thrilled, said it would be great PR and absolutely hilarious. So I turned back to the dazed crowd and made the announcement. Anyone who wanted a quick helicopter ride could take one, free of charge as long as they agreed to leave the property afterward. Hands shot up everywhere. Karen shrieked, voice cracking, "No one is leaving my wedding for a helicopter ride. This is my day." But nobody listened. They were tired, sweaty, coated in dust, and more than ready for a getaway. A scenic flight beat watching a meltdown any day. One by one, guests lined up, buckled in, and lifted off, waving cheerfully at the bride as she stood fuming in the dirt, fists clenched, eyes. I assumed Karen's wedding disaster would just become one of those legendary stories I'd tell over coffee for the next 10 years, and the kind that gets better with each retelling. I figured she'd slink off into obscurity, humility, and maybe even a little wiser. I was wrong. The next morning, I stepped outside to survey the damage and found a glittery pink notice taped to my fence. In bold script, it read, "Cease and desist, property harassment pending legal action." I stared at it, expecting it to vanish like some bizarre mirage, but it was really complete with Karen's full name and a printed email accusing me of causing emotional distress, loss of ceremonial memories, and malicious destruction of marital celebration. I laughed so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. Apparently, Karen believed she had a legal case against me for helicopters landing on my own leased property during her unauthorized event. It was delusion on a level I hadn't seen since the town hall tried to ban roosters for crowing too early. I pulled the paper down, walked back inside, and called my lawyer friend, Amy. She answered on the second ring, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I read her the letter. There was a pause and then a laugh so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Once she calmed down, she said, "Send me everything," sounding almost giddy. Amy loved a good meltdown, especially one wrapped in entitlement and legal fantasy, and she really loved winning. I spent the next hour compiling the receipts, helicopter lease agreements, FA approvals, timestamped messages from the wedding planner, and photos and videos I had taken myself. I even included a phone recording of Karen shrieking threats at me over her ruined dress. Amy reviewed it all and declared, "You've already won and she hasn't even filed." But Karen wasn't finished. That afternoon, she posted a dramatic sob story on social media, claiming a cruel local man had deliberately sabotaged the wedding and endangered her guests with rogue helicopters. She went so far as to claim it was revenge for rejecting my advances at a charity event. I almost spit out my tea. I'd never met this woman before the day she crashed onto my lawn in a white dress and a bad attitude. But lies spread like wildfire online. Within hours, her post had hundreds of comments. A few people even expressed sympathy. And then the tide turned. Someone, bless them, uploaded drone footage from Karen's own wedding drone. It had kept recording well past the point of disaster, catching everything from the first chopper's arrival to the moment she hurled her bouquet like a javelin at the sky. It was glorious, chaos and cinematic 4K. The video went viral. Titles like Bridezilla vs. the Air Force and Wedding Crash Landing, Helicopter Edition dominated feeds. Millions of views poured in, People freeze-framed the footage to point out the no trespassing sign she'd hidden behind flowers. They laughed at guests cheerfully boarding helicopters while Karen spun in rage. Someone even caught her trying to punt a cake table. Her carefully crafted narrative crumbled under the weight of cold, hard evidence. Then came the memes. One remix synced her screams to a dubstep drop. Another looped a slow-motion shot of her veil blowing across the field like a lost ghost. Her name started trending for all the wrong reasons. Still, she tried to salvage it. She uploaded a tearful car confessional, begging people to understand that she had been ambushed on her special day. But the internet had moved on. One commenter said it best, "Lady, you didn't get married. You got airlifted out of your own delusion." Then came the vendors. The caterer posted screenshots of unpaid invoices and texts where Karen promised to pay with an inheritance. The DJ shared a video of the wedding planner screaming, "I'm not liable," into the wind. Even the florist posted about filing a small claims case for damages to her rented flower stands. As the receipts rolled in, Karen's posts began vanishing. First the wedding photos, then the rants, then the crying video. Within 2 days, all her profiles were private. But it was too late. The internet had spoken. Meanwhile, I received an email from her lawyer, or rather, someone claiming to be one. It was more of a passive-aggressive word salad than a legal notice. It never mentioned trespassing, just nonsense like emotional sabotage and negligent celebration of destruction. Amy drafted a response sharp, polite, and utterly devastating. We attached all our documentation, plus a counter-demand, restitution for property damage, disruption of scheduled flights, and cleanup costs. Total, over $30,000. I signed it with a smile and hit send. Karen's lawyer went radio silent after Amy's response. No follow-up, no counter, not even a typo-ridden email. They knew they had nothing. I figured that was the end of it, and for the most part, it was. Until I got a call from a local news station. They'd seen the viral video and wanted to run a feel-good segment on my property, the helicopters, and the bizarre standoff between private property rights and over-the-top entitlement. I agreed, on one condition: I got to tell my side exactly as it happened. When the segment aired, it blew up. The story was framed as small-town man stands up to wedding invasion. They played clips of the choppers landing, and the shredded wedding tent flapping like a war flag in the wind. They never mentioned Karen by name, but anyone who'd seen the memes knew exactly who she was. The best part came a week later, when a tourism magazine reached out to the helicopter company for a feature. They wanted to highlight unique flight experiences, and my field had made the list. The pilot told me he'd given them a quote about his most unforgettable landing, one that involved dodging lace parasols and airborne shrimp cocktail. I laughed until my ribs hurt, but the real cherry on top came completely out of the blue. One of the wedding guests, an older gentleman who had taken one of the joyrides, sent me a handwritten thank you letter. He said it was the most thrilling day of his life, that the aerial view made him feel young again. He even enclosed a check for $200 as a thank you. I framed the letter. Karen had tried to hijack my land for her fairy tale wedding. Instead, she created a viral catastrophe that racked up citations, lawsuits, unpaid vendor bills, and a permanent place in meme history. For me, though, it became something more: a proof that boundaries matter, that facts beat fiction, and that sometimes the universe doesn't argue. It sends in helicopters with 40 miles per hour winds and blades that slice through entitlement like butter. Just when I thought the final chapter had been written, that the saga was finally over, the universe spun back around with one more plot twist. 2 weeks after the video had gone viral and Karen had vanished from every known social platform, I received a certified letter in the mail. At first, I thought it was a prank. It wasn't from Karen directly, but from another firm claiming to represent her. The letter, soaked in arrogance and legal fluff, demanded that I issue a public apology, compensate Karen for her trauma, cover the full cost of her failed wedding, and immediately cease all helicopter-related activity on my property. Reading it felt like trying to interpret a fairy tale written by someone high on glitter and denial. They used phrases like psychological sabotage, deliberate emotional infliction, and wrongful aviation conduct, But the most unhinged part, a clause demanding that I fully fund a second wedding at a venue of Karen's choice, complete with transportation, premium lodging for all guests, and emotional restoration services. I read the letter twice, convinced I had misread it. Then I scanned it, sent it to Amy, and called her. She didn't answer with a hello, just a long sigh, followed by, "Here we go again." She told me to sit tight while she prepared a response, one that would not only dismantle every outrageous claim but make it crystal clear the joke had gone on long enough. Amy's reply was surgical. She reattached every piece of evidence, the FOA approvals, the sheriff's citations issued to Karen, screenshots from the planner admitting the trespass, and a full breakdown of the property damage. And she wasn't done yet. A broken bar. Karen's damage didn't end with the mess on my property. Amy made sure to include that in our response. At the bottom of her letter, she added a clause of her own. Either they drop all legal action and issue a written apology, or we file a countersuit for harassment, false claims, and interference with business operations. That shut things down real fast. 3 days later, I received a single-line email from Karen's law firm. "We no longer represent the client in question." I chuckled, closed the email, and moved on with my day. Karen might have finally grasped the consequences of her actions, but the internet hadn't forgotten her. Not even close. Memes continued to thrive. One particularly brilliant person created a parody wedding invite that read, "Join us for the wedding of the century," complete with sudden gusts of wind, rotating cake platforms, and surprise flyovers. Someone else compiled a wedding fail supercut ending with Karen's tent collapse as the grand finale. That video alone racked up over 10 million views in a week. Then a wedding photographer who'd worked the event finally broke his silence. He posted a blog titled "When Brides Go Rogue," including anonymized photos of the aftermath: tables toppled, heels lost in the mud, bits of arch floating in the pond. His caption: "I've seen beach weddings, barn weddings, even one with llamas, but nothing prepared me for the helicopter wedding." While the internet laughed, something strange began to happen. People started reaching out to the helicopter company. Apparently, my property had become an accidental tourist attraction. Requests came pouring in. Some just wanted to see where the veil had taken flight. Others asked if we offered reenactments. It was surreal. What began as trespassing nightmare was now a business opportunity. The helicopter company didn't miss a beat. They introduced a new package, the Bridal Gust Tour, complete with in-flight commentary on the incident. They even let passengers toss fake bouquets out of the chopper for laughs. I got a cut of every flight, of course, which only made it funnier. And it wasn't just tourists. Reporters came looking for interviews. A documentary crew wanted to shoot a feature on viral property disputes. A podcast host interviewed me about the chaos of becoming accidentally internet famous because someone tried to marry herself to your lawn. I kept thinking, this has to die down eventually, but it didn't. Instead, it grew. People started sending me letters. One envelope contained a crumpled wedding invitation with a note: "Thanks for reminding me to actually book my venue next time." Another had a keychain shaped like a helicopter, along with a thank you note from a couple who canceled their backyard wedding after watching the video. Someone even sent a Starbucks gift card with a note that read, "You deserve this for surviving airborne Karen." But the strangest request came via email. A guy asked if he could propose to his girlfriend on my property under the same arch where Karen's had blown away. He said he wanted something ironic and unforgettable. I told him, sure, as long as you don't block the helicopters or bring anyone named Karen. He laughed, agreed, and flew in that weekend. I watched from the porch as he dropped to one knee in the middle of the field. No drama, no flying lace, just a clean, quiet yes and two people walking away hand in hand. As they left, the woman turned, waved, and shouted, "This place has way better vibes than TikTok said." I waved back, smiling. All the chaos, all the drama had reshaped my land into something new. Once a quiet, untouched patch of earth, it now buzzed with strange new energy. Tourists came and went, proposals happened, and a weird little legend had been born. It reminded me just how fast life can shift from peaceful to insane, and then, if you lean into it, back to something meaningful. And I'll admit, I enjoyed the poetic justice. One of the news outlets ran a follow-up, Karen and her now ex-fiancé tilde copyright had officially split. According to unnamed sources, he'd been humiliated by her behavior and her refusal to apologize. The circus she'd created online. He moved out within days and returned the ring. Some outlets speculated the incident made him rethink the entire relationship. I couldn't confirm any of that, but I wasn't the least bit surprised. Entitlement might hijack a wedding, but it's not strong enough to hold together a marriage. Toward the end of the month, I decided to mark the whole ridiculous saga with a sign. I hand-carved it from reclaimed wood, mounted it between two tall posts at the entrance to my property. It read, "No trespassing, a active helicopter landing zone. Wedding reenactments start at 3 p.m. Saturdays." I even added a little chopper icon at the bottom, just for flair. People loved it. Some took pictures with it. Others just stood quietly as the blades of the next helicopter sliced through the air in the distance, that familiar whirring rhythm spinning overhead. What started with an uninvited bride and a heap of folding chairs had somehow become one of the most unexpected, bizarre, and strangely rewarding chapters of my life. And as I stood there once more on my porch, watching the grass ripple under the wind, I realized something. Sometimes, the best revenge a broken bar is letting the wind tell the story. Revenge doesn't always come loud or angry. Sometimes, it just means letting the world witness someone's behavior in full daylight and then stepping back to let the propellers do their work. Weeks passed. The storm faded into something oddly serene, like the eye of a legend. The field settled back into its rhythm, helicopters arriving like clockwork, pilots swapping stories between flights, and the occasional tourist grinning for a selfie next to the now iconic sign. For a while, I thought that was it, the end of the saga, but the universe, with its twisted sense of humor, had one more encore planned. It was a bright Saturday morning. I was on the porch, sipping my usual coffee, when I heard tires crunch over gravel. A modest rental car with out-of-state plates pulled up. I assumed it was another tourist, until the driver stepped out. My jaw clenched. Karen's mother. I'd seen her in the drone footage, always perfectly styled, dressed like she was heading to a garden party hosted by a judge. Her face wore the same expression of refined disapproval, like she'd just smelled something mildly offensive and was too polite to name it. She walked up with careful steps, clutching her purse like it was part of a courtroom exhibit. I debated heading inside, but curiosity held me there. She introduced herself politely, stiffly, and asked if she could speak with me. Against better judgment, I nodded. We sat on the porch steps. For a while, she said nothing. Then, in a voice more weary than angry, she explained that she was here to apologize, not for Karen, but for herself. At first, she'd only heard Karen's version. It had taken her weeks to piece together what had really happened. When she finally saw the drone footage and, worse, saw herself on camera, she was horrified. I had forgotten she'd even been involved. Apparently, she was the one barking orders at the caterers and insisting they use my garden hose to chill champagne. She told me the embarrassment had fractured her relationship with Karen, who still refused to take responsibility and had only grown more defensive since the fallout. Her mother, on the other hand, had done some reflecting. She said she'd grown up believing confidence could get you through anything. That entitlement was just another form of survival. But watching it all blow up, she said, literally, that was humbling. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't angry anymore, just cautious. She didn't ask for forgiveness, only acknowledgement, that I could give. We shook hands. She left without asking for a photo, a favor, or a second chance, and somehow, that felt like closure. Not the neat, cinematic kind, but the real kind, uneven, honest. That very afternoon, the chaos reignited. I got a call from the helicopter company. Apparently, an A-list actor, famous for his offbeat humor and strange Instagram captions, had shared the viral wedding clip with the message, "If I ever get married again, it's happening here." Within hours, the internet caught fire again. Old videos resurfaced. Thousands of new eyes landed on the story. People started booking flights months in advance, just for the chance to land on the field where it all went down. My land had become folklore. The actor never showed up, but his fans did en force. One couple drove across 3 states in full wedding attire to reenact the chaos as performance art. They posed beneath a fake arch, laughed, and left without leaving a trace. No drama, no debris, just joy. Even the town joined in. The local diner added a dessert called Karen's Cake Disaster, a vanilla crumble, whipped topping, and sugar shards shaped like tent poles. The nearby gift shop began selling many toy helicopters with pop-up veils. And the mayor? He jokingly asked if I'd consider turning the place into an official event venue. I declined. The novelty was amusing, but I liked keeping things simple. Besides, chaos didn't need an invitation, it had a habit of finding me on its own. Still, I wanted the whirlwind to mean something. So with the money I'd earned from tourist traffic, media royalties, and new lease agreements, I started a quiet fund. Nothing flashy. It covered equipment for the volunteer fire department, paid for school field trips, and fixed the leaky roof of the old community center. I didn't make an announcement, I just did it, but the town noticed. One evening, a few local